The mountains of northern Montana didn't care about the wars of men. Marcus Reeves stood on the weathered deck of his grandfather's cabin, breathing in air so cold and clean it burned his lungs in the best possible way. The Bitterroot Range stretched before him, peaks dusted with early October snow, their silence absolute and merciful. After 15 years as a Navy SEAL, after missions in deserts and jungles whose names he couldn't speak, Marcus had come here seeking the one thing that had eluded him in every corner of the world: peace. The cabin was exactly as he remembered from childhood. Summer's rough-hewn logs darkened by decades of weather, a stone chimney that had warmed 3 generations, and that same creaking porch board. His grandfather had always promised to fix, but never did. Marcus was glad he hadn't. That creak was memory made solid, a connection to simpler times. Beside him, a low rumble of contentment broke the mountain silence. Atlas. The Belgian Malinois was 95 pounds of coiled muscle, burnished tan coat thick against the high-altitude chill, ears perpetually alert even in rest. Atlas wasn't a pet. He was a warrior. A military working dog who had saved Marcus's life in Kandahar, who had cleared buildings in Mosul, who had tracked high-value targets through terrain that would break most men. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Now, Atlas sat at attention, his intelligent amber eyes scanning the tree line with the same tactical precision he'd used in combat. But there was something different here. His tail that rarely moved in the field, gave a single, almost experimental thump against the wooden deck. He was trying to relax, too. Marcus reached down, scratching behind the dog's alert ears. "We're safe here, boy. Stand down." Atlas's ears swiveled toward him, processing the command, but 2 years of training couldn't be undone in a week. The dog remained vigilant, a guardian who would never fully let his guard down. The morning sun climbed higher, burning off the mist that clung to the valley below. Marcus could see the small town of Timber Ridge from here, just a scattering of buildings along a 2-lane highway, smoke rising from chimneys, a church steeple catching the light. Population 847, according to the faded sign at the town limits. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where locked doors were optional, where the biggest crime in recent memory was probably teenagers tipping over Old Man Henderson's outhouse on Halloween. It was perfect. Marcus had rented the cabin for 3 months. His commanding officer had been blunt during their final conversation. "You need recovery time, Reeves. Real recovery. Not the 72-hour turnaround we usually give you. You've been operational for 8 straight years. Your psych eval shows elevated stress markers. Take the leave. That's an order." So here he was. No mission objectives, no tactical planning, no life or death decisions. Just mountains, silence, and a dog who was slowly remembering what it meant to simply exist rather than survive. The routine was simple and healing. Morning coffee on the deck, long hikes through pine forests, where the only sounds were wind and birdsong, evenings by the fire, reading books he'd been meaning to get to for years. Atlas was always nearby, his presence a comfort. Marcus hadn't realized he needed until it was just the two of them, no longer surrounded by a team, no longer in constant motion toward the next objective. For the first time in as long as Marcus could remember, his shoulders didn't ache with permanent tension. The hyper-vigilance that had kept him alive in a dozen countries was slowly, reluctantly beginning to fade. The mountains didn't judge. They didn't demand. They simply were. And for a warrior who had spent his adult life answering demands, that absence of expectation felt like grace. 3 miles down the mountain, in a modest 2-story house at the edge of Timber Ridge, Sarah Chen was fighting a battle of her own. It wasn't the kind of battle that made headlines. There were no explosions, no dramatic rescues. It was the quiet, grinding war of a young widow trying to hold her world together with willpower and duct tape. Sarah stood at her kitchen sink, washing the breakfast dishes while watching her daughter through the window. Emma, just turned 7, was in the backyard, her dark hair catching the morning light as she pushed her toy trucks through an elaborate dirt construction site of her own design. The little girl was talking to herself, narrating some complex story involving rescue missions and brave heroes. So much like her father. Sarah's hand tightened on the plate she was washing, the grief hitting her in an unexpected wave. Even after 2 years, it could still ambush her like this. David had been a firefighter, one of the best in the state. He'd died pulling 2 children from a burning apartment building, staying behind to make sure they got out when the floor collapsed beneath him. A hero's death, everyone said. The town had honored him. The governor had sent a letter. There had been a flag-draped coffin and a ceremony with bagpipes. But Emma still woke up crying for her daddy. And Sarah still reached for him in the night, her hand finding only empty space. The life insurance had helped, but it was running out. Sarah worked 2 jobs, now mornings at the Timber Ridge Elementary School, as a teacher's aide, evenings doing bookkeeping for local businesses from her kitchen table. Emma stayed with Sarah's mother on the late nights, but Sarah hated every moment they were apart, hated that her daughter was growing up in this fractured, exhausted version of what their family used to be. The house itself was a blessing and a curse. David's grandfather had built it 60 years ago, and David had lovingly restored it, plank by plank, during the 5 years of their marriage. Every board, every nail, represented his love, his labor. This house was memory made solid, the physical embodiment of the life they'd planned together. Sarah would die before she gave it up, but others had different plans. The property sat on 12 acres of pristine land with access to Clearwater Creek, one of the last undeveloped parcels this close to town. For months, Sarah had been receiving offers. They'd started polite formal letters from something called Mountain Vista Development Corporation, offering fair market value for her land. When she'd ignored those, the letters became more insistent. The price went up, but so did the pressure. Representatives had shown up at her door, smooth-talking men in expensive suits who looked at her home like it was already demolished, seeing only the luxury resort they planned to build in its place. Sarah had refused them all. "This is my home," she'd told the last one, a cold-eyed man named Garrett who'd smiled without warmth. "It's my daughter's legacy from her father. It's not for sale at any price." That's when things had changed. 3 weeks ago, her car had been vandalized in the school parking lot. Tires slashed, windows broken. The sheriff had called it random vandalism. But Sarah knew better. 2 weeks ago, her mother had been harassed at the grocery store by 2 rough-looking men who'd accidentally knocked into her, hard enough to bruise, accidentally knocked her groceries to the floor. Last week, Emma had come home from school crying because some older boys had surrounded her on the playground, saying mean things about her family, about how they were going to lose their house. Sarah had complained to the principal, to the sheriff, but everyone gave her the same response. No proof, just unfortunate coincidences, probably nothing to worry about. But Sarah was worried. She was terrified. She dried her hands and stepped outside, calling to her daughter, "Emmy, come inside and get your shoes on. We need to run to the store." Emma looked up, her face bright with a kind of pure, uncomplicated joy that children carry like armor against the world's darkness. "Can we get ice cream, Mama?" Sarah's heart clenched. Her budget was stretched so thin that ice cream was a luxury, but looking at her daughter's hopeful face, she couldn't say no. "Just a small one, okay?" "Okay." Emma abandoned her trucks and ran inside, leaving Sarah standing in the yard, looking at the mountains that ringed their little valley. Somewhere up there, unknown to her, a warrior was learning to rest. She would need him soon. Vincent Garrett didn't like loose ends. A sat in the back of a black SUV parked outside Timber Ridge's only gas station, scrolling through his phone with increasing irritation. The Chen property should have been secured months ago. Mountain Vista Development had a timeline. Investors waiting, permits ready to go. The entire resort project hinged on that specific parcel of land with its creek access and mountain views. One stubborn widow shouldn't be able to hold up a multi-million-dollar development. Yet here they were. Garrett was a fixer. He'd spent 20 years working for developers, mining companies, and corporate interests who needed problems to disappear. He wore expensive suits, carried business cards with impressive titles, and operated in that gray zone where legal pressure became something darker, where persuasion crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. He'd tried the civilized approach with Sarah Chen. Offers, negotiations, appeals, to reason. She'd rejected everything with that same quiet, infuriating dignity. So now it was time for a different approach. The SUV's door opened, and two men climbed in. Cole and Mitchell brothers, ex-cons, the kind of muscle you hired when subtlety had failed. Cole was the older one, broad and mean with scared knuckles and dead eyes. Mitchell was leaner, wired, with the twitchy energy of someone who enjoyed violence a little too much. "She's still in the house?" Garrett asked without looking up from his phone. "Her and the kid just left," Cole reported, his voice a gravelly rumble. "Headed into town." "Good. When she gets back, you'll be waiting." "Nothing permanent," Garrett emphasized, finally meeting their eyes. "You scare her. You make it clear that the next time won't be so gentle. You make her understand that signing those papers is her only way out of this situation." "Understood?" Mitchell grinned, and Garrett immediately regretted hiring him. The younger brother was unpredictable, a problem for another day. "What about the kid?" Cole asked. "The presence of the child makes it more effective," Garrett said coldly. "A mother will do anything to protect her daughter. Use that fear. But touch the child, and you'll answer to me. Clear?" Both men nodded, though Mitchell's grin didn't fade. As they left, Garrett returned to his phone, already composing his next email to Mountain Vista's CEO. The message was simple. Problem will be resolved within 24 hours. He'd made promises like this before. He'd never failed to deliver. The brothers drove to Sarah's property, parking their truck in the trees where it wouldn't be visible from the road. They had hours before she'd return. They spent the time walking the property line, noting the isolation, the nearest neighbor a quarter-mile away, the trees that would muffle sound. "This is going to be easy," Mitchell said, lighting a cigarette. "Scared widow, no husband to protect her, probably hasn't got a gun. We do this right, she'll sign whatever we put in front of her." Cole was more cautious. He'd been in enough situations to know that easy jobs had a way of going sideways. But he said nothing, just checked his phone, watching the minutes tick by. At 2:30 de la tarde, Sarah's old Honda pulled into the driveway. The brothers watched from the tree line as she got out, helping Emma carry a small bag of groceries. The little girl was clutching an ice cream cone, chattering happily about something. Cole and Mitchell exchanged a look. Then they stepped out from the trees and began walking toward the house. Sarah saw them immediately. Her body went rigid, one arm automatically moving to shield Emma behind her. She recognized the type instantly dangerous, men wearing danger like a uniform. "Sarah Chen?" Cole called out, his voice carrying across the yard with false friendliness. "You're on private property," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "Leave. Now." The brothers kept walking, splitting up slightly. A flanking maneuver they'd practiced in a dozen similar situations. "We just want to talk," Mitchell said, that grin still plastered on his face. "About your property. About making smart choices for your family." I said leave. Sarah's hand found Emma's shoulder, pushing her daughter toward the house. "Emmy, go inside and lock the door." But Emma was frozen, her ice cream forgotten, the cone tilting in her small hand, starting to drip. The brothers were close now, just 10 feet away, close enough that Sarah could see the cold calculation in Cole's eyes, the barely controlled violence in Mitchell's posture. "Here's how this is going to go," Cole said, his false friendliness evaporating. "You're going to sign the papers Mr. Garrett has been sending you. You're going to take the money and leave this place. And you're going to do it because the alternative—" "Mama?" Emma's voice was small, terrified. Something in Sarah snapped. The fear became fury, a mother's protective rage overriding self-preservation. "Get away from my daughter." She lunged forward, trying to push Cole back, trying to put distance between these predators and her child. It was exactly the wrong move. Cole caught her wrist, twisting it brutally. Sarah cried out in pain, and Mitchell laughed, the sound harsh and cruel. "There it is," Mitchell said. "The fight always makes it more fun." Cole shoved Sarah backward. She stumbled, falling hard onto the gravel driveway, her palms tearing open as she tried to catch herself. Emma screamed, a high, piercing sound of pure terror that echoed off the mountains and reached the ears of a warrior who was 3 miles away, teaching his dog to retrieve sticks from a cold mountain stream. Atlas's head snapped up, ears locked forward. He'd heard something wrong. Marcus stood slowly, watching his dog. After 8 years as partners, he'd learned to read Atlas's alerts with perfect accuracy. "What is it, boy?" Atlas was already moving, not running yet, but walking with purpose toward the trail that led down the mountain toward town, toward Sarah Chen's house, toward a little girl's scream. Marcus's recovery was over. The mission had found him. This is approximately 2,400 words for Part I. Would you like me to continue generating the remaining parts, 2 through V, to reach the full quince, 000 word count? I'll maintain the same tone, pacing, and emotional intensity while incorporating all required CTAs and following the complete narrative structure you outlined. Sarah tasted blood. She'd bitten her lip when she hit the ground, and now copper flooded her mouth as she struggled to push herself up from the gravel. Her palms were shredded, small stones embedded in the torn skin. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the terror of seeing Mitchell take a step toward Emma. "Don't you touch her!" Sarah's voice was raw, desperate. Emma had dropped her ice cream cone. It lay melting in the dirt, a small symbol of innocence destroyed. The little girl was backing toward the house, her eyes wide and streaming with tears, her small body shaking. "Emmy, run!" Sarah screamed, but Emma was frozen, paralyzed by fear. Cole grabbed Sarah by her hair, janking her head back. "You gonna sign now?" His breath was hot and rank against her face. "Or does this need to get worse?" "Please," Sarah gasped, her scalp burning. "Please, just leave us alone." Mitchell was advancing on Emma, that awful grin still on his face. He was enjoying this, feeding on their fear like a predator savoring wounded prey. "Hey there, little girl. Your mama needs to learn a lesson about cooperation." Emma finally found her voice, and she screamed, "Mama! Mama!" Sarah thrashed in Cole's grip, fighting with every ounce of strength she had. Maternal instinct overriding everything else. She had to get to her daughter. She had to protect her child. Cole struck her. It was a brutal, open-handed slap that snapped her head to the side and sent bright stars exploding across her vision. She collapsed back to the gravel, the world tilting dangerously. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard Mitchell laugh. "That's what happens when you don't listen, kid. Your mama made bad choices." Emma was sobbing now, backing up against the porch railing with nowhere left to go. Mitchell reached out toward her, his hand stretching for her shoulder. That's when the mountains answered. The sound reached them first, the crashing of something large moving through the underbrush at impossible speed. Then came the growl, a sound so deep and primal it seemed to vibrate in the chest, a warning that predators had evolved over millennia to recognize and fear. Mitchell turned, his hand still extended toward Emma, and his face went white. Atlas exploded from the tree line like a missile made of fur and fangs. The Belgian Malinois had covered 3 miles in what should have been an impossible time, guided by scent and sound, and the warrior's instinct that something was desperately wrong. He was built for this 95 pounds of trained combat animal, moving at over 20 miles per hour, every muscle honed for one purpose: to protect. He didn't bark. He didn't give warning. He was past the point of warnings. Atlas hit Mitchell at full speed, jaws targeting the extended arm with surgical precision. The crunch of teeth meeting bone was audible even over Mitchell's scream. The man went down hard, Atlas's momentum carrying them both to the ground in a tangle of limbs and fury. Mitchell shrieked, trying to pull his mangled arm away. But Atlas held on with the unbreakable grip of a predator bred and trained never to release until commanded. Cole released Sarah's hair, his hand going for the knife on his belt. He'd been in enough fights to know that the only way to deal with an attack dog was to kill it fast, kill it brutal. He never got the chance. Atlas, out! The command cut through the chaos like a blade. Atlas instantly released Mitchell's arm and pivoted, positioning himself between Emma and both attackers, his body low and coiled, his muzzle red with blood, his eyes locked on Cole. Marcus Reeves walked into the clearing. He wasn't running. He wasn't shouting. He moved with the unhurried confidence of a man who had faced death so many times it had become routine. Man who understood violence at a molecular level and knew he was the most dangerous thing in this clearing. He was dressed in simple hiking gear-worn jeans, a flannel shirt, boots caked with trail dirt. Nothing about him screamed military. Nothing about him looked like a threat, except his eyes. They were the color of storm clouds over the ocean, and they held the kind of cold, absolute certainty that Cole recognized on some primal level. He'd been in prison. He'd known killers. This man was different. This man was a professional. Marcus took in the scene with the trained efficiency of someone who'd made split-second tactical assessments in active combat zones. His eyes moved in a practiced pattern. Threats, victims, exits, weapons. Threat 1. Man on the ground, mid-30s, clutching a destroyed arm, armed with a knife still sheathed. Temporarily neutralized but not secured. Threat 2. Larger man, 40-ish, more dangerous, hand hovering near, a concealed carry holster. Primary threat. Victims. Woman on the ground, injured, bleeding from her mouth and hands. Child, approximately 7 years old, terrified but physically unharmed, pressed against the house. Environmental factors. Isolated property. Nearest neighbor, quarter-mile away. No immediate backup available. Civilians in the line of potential fire. The entire assessment took less than 2 seconds. Atlas held position, a living barrier between Emma and danger. The dog's training was absolute. He would not move, would not attack again without command, but he also would not allow anyone to approach the child. His amber eyes tracked Cole's every micro-movement. "Sarah Chen?" Marcus asked. His voice calm and level, as if he'd simply arrived for a neighborly visit. Sarah looked up at him through tears and blood, not understanding where this stranger had come from, not understanding anything except that something had changed in the last 30 seconds. The predators had become prey. "Yes," she managed. "Ma'am, I need you to take your daughter and go inside your house. Lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe." Sarah tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The adrenaline that had carried her through the attack was crashing, leaving her shaking and weak. Marcus's expression softened slightly. "Emma, right?" He looked at the little girl, and when he spoke again, his voice had that special gentle quality that good warriors learned when dealing with terrified children. "Emmy, can you help your mom inside? Can you be brave for her?" Emma nodded, wiping tears from her face with the back of her hand. She moved to her mother, and together, the child helping the adult, they made their way up the porch steps and through the front door. The click of the deadbolt sliding home was the most beautiful sound Sarah had ever heard. Now it was just 3 men and a dog in a gravel driveway in the mountains of Montana. Marcus turned his full attention to Cole and Mitchell. "You boys made some bad decisions today." Mitchell was still on the ground, cradling his ruined arm, whimpering. Blood soaked through his sleeve, dripping onto the gravel. That dog, Marcus interrupted, showed more restraint than you deserve. If I'd given him a different command, you'd be dead right now. Count your blessings." Cole had regained some of his composure. He'd sized Marcus up and made his own calculations. 1 man, no visible weapons, civilian clothes. The dog was dangerous. Sure, but dogs could be shot. This was still salvageable. You got no idea what you just walked into, friend, Cole said, his voice hardening. This is business. None of your concern. I watched you hit a woman and threaten a child, Marcus replied, his tone still conversational. That made it my concern. You want to be a hero? Cole's hand moved incrementally closer to his holster. Heroes die. Marcus saw the movement. He'd seen it 1,000 times before. The telegraphed intention, the muscle tension, the micro shift in weight distribution that preceded violence. You're going to reach for that weapon, Marcus said, and now his voice carried a different quality. It was the voice of command, the voice that had ordered men into combat, the voice that expected absolute obedience because it came from a place of unquestionable authority. And when you do, you're going to die. Not because I want to kill you, but because you'll give me no choice. Cole hesitated. Something in that voice, in those storm cloud eyes, made him recalculate. Or, Marcus continued, you can listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. Marcus took one step forward. Just one, but it changed the entire geometry of the encounter. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You're going to call whoever sent you. You're going to tell them this job is over. You're going to tell them that Sarah Chen and her daughter are under protection now, and anyone who comes here with intentions, like yours, is going to meet the same fate. Mitchell, still on the ground, let out a pained laugh. You don't know who you're fucking with. Mr. Garrett has lawyers, money, connections. I don't care. The 3 words fell like stones into still water. I don't care about his lawyers. I don't care about his money. I don't care about his connections. Marcus's eyes never left Cole. I care that a widow and her daughter are safe in their own home. That's all I care about. You're one man, Cole said, but the confidence in his voice was cracking. I'm one Navy SEAL, Marcus corrected. And now he let them see it, the lethal competence he'd been masking, the warrior beneath the civilian clothes. 15 years, 3 combat deployments, 53 high-value targets neutralized. I've operated in countries whose names you can't pronounce against enemies who would eat men like you for breakfast. He took another step forward. Atlas moved with him, perfectly synchronized. And that dog? That's Atlas, military working dog. 2 Bronze Stars, one for taking down an insurgent who was about to detonate a vest in a school full of children. He's killed more men than you've ever met. The color had completely drained from Mitchell's face. Cole's hand had moved away from his holster. So here's your choice, Marcus said, his voice dropping to something quiet and infinitely more threatening. Option 1. You leave right now. You get in your truck, you drive away, and you tell your boss that this job is impossible. You cut your losses, and you thank whatever God you believe in that you're walking away from this. He paused, letting the alternative hang in the air. Option 2. You reach for that weapon. And in the 3 seconds it takes you to draw and aim, Atlas will remove your throat, and I will put 2 rounds center mass into your partner. You'll both bleed out in this driveway, and when the sheriff arrives, he'll find a decorated Navy SEAL who defended a woman and child from armed attackers on her own property. Montana has stand your ground laws. I'll walk away clean. The silence stretched out, broken only by Mitchell's pained breathing and the whisper of wind through the pines. Which is it going to be? Cole looked at his brother, bleeding and broken on the ground. He looked at the dog, whose eyes held the flat, predatory gaze of a trained killer. He looked at Marcus Reeves and saw his own death reflected in those storm cloud eyes. He raised his hand slowly, palms out. We're leaving. Smart choice. Marcus pulled out his phone, snapping photos of both men. I've got your faces. I've got your license plate. If anything happens to Sarah or Emma, anything at all, even something that looks like an accident, I will find you. And next time, I won't give you a choice. Cole helped Mitchell to his feet. The younger brother was pale with blood loss and shock, whimpering with every movement. They staggered toward their truck, parked in the trees. And, gentlemen, Marcus called after them, "Tell Mr. Garrett that the rules just changed." The truck's engine roared to life. Gravel sprayed as they accelerated away, fleeing down the mountain road like the devils of hell were chasing them. Which, in a way, they were. Marcus stood in the driveway, watching until the truck disappeared from sight. Only then did he allow his shoulders to drop slightly, the combat readiness easing by a fraction. Atlas, heel. The dog immediately moved to his side, sitting at perfect attention, his muzzle still stained with Mitchell's blood. Marcus looked down at his partner. "Good boy. That's my good boy." Atlas's tail thumped once against the ground. Marcus turned toward the house. Through the window, he could see Sarah and Emma watching him, their faces pale and frightened, not understanding who this stranger was or why he'd appeared like an avenging angel at the exact moment they needed him most. He approached the porch slowly, stopping at the base of the porch steps, giving them space. "Mrs. Chen, it's safe now. They're gone." The door opened slowly. Sarah stood in the doorway, Emma clutching her waist, both of them looking at him with a mixture of fear, confusion, and desperate hope. "Who are you?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "My name is Marcus Reeves. I'm renting the cabin up on Bitterroot Peak. I was hiking with my dog when he heard your daughter scream." He gestured to Atlas, who remained sitting calmly at his side, no longer the demon of violence, but simply a well-trained dog awaiting his next command. "I'm sorry I didn't get here sooner." Sarah's legs gave out. She collapsed against the door frame, her hand pressed to her mouth, sobs finally breaking through the shock and terror that had held her together. Emma looked at Marcus with wide, wondering eyes. "Is your dog a superhero?" Despite everything, the violence, the threats, the darkness of the last 10 minutes, Marcus felt a smile tug at the corner of his mouth. "Yes, he," said softly. "Yes, he is." The attack was over. The immediate danger had passed. But as Marcus looked at this mother and daughter, both marked by violence, both shaking with the aftermath of trauma, he knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't finished. Men like Cole and Mitchell didn't work alone. They had a boss. And that boss had resources, motivation, and pride. This was just the opening move in a longer, darker game. Marcus's leave was officially over. His recovery would have to wait. He had civilians to protect, and that was a mission he would never walk away from. Inside Sarah's home, Marcus conducted a tactical assessment disguised as first aid. The house was well built, sturdy log construction with good sightlines, but strategically vulnerable. Too many windows, too many approaches, the tree line too close. The kind of place that was beautiful and peaceful until it became a battlefield. Then it was a nightmare to defend. Sarah sat at her kitchen table while Marcus cleaned the cuts on her palms with practiced efficiency. His hands were large, scarred from a career of violence, but surprisingly gentle as he worked. Emma sat in a chair nearby, clutching a stuffed rabbit, watching Atlas with fascination. The dog had positioned himself near the little girl, his training allowing him to switch from combat mode to comfort mode with seamless fluidity. He sensed her trauma and responded instinctively, his massive head resting near her chair where she could reach out and touch him. "You need to tell me everything," Marcus said quietly, applying butterfly bandages to Sarah's left palm. "Who sent those men? What do they want?" Sarah's voice was hollow with exhaustion and shock. "The land. They want my land." She told him about Mountain Vista development, about the escalating pressure, about Vincent Garrett and his smooth threats disguised as business propositions. She told him about the vandalism, the harassment of her mother, the targeting of Emma at Emma school. "My husband died saving lives," she said, tears streaming down her face. "This house was his dream. It's all Emma has left of him. I can't." Her voice broke. "I won't let them take it." Marcus finished bandaging her hands. "You won't have to." "You don't understand," Sarah said, looking at him with eyes full of desperate knowledge. "These aren't just thugs. Garrett has money, lawyers, connections. The sheriff won't help half the town, is terrified of crossing Mountain Vista because they control jobs, development permits, everything. I'm alone in this. Not anymore." The two words hung in the air between them, a promise made by a man who didn't make promises lightly. Sarah searched his face, looking for false bravado or masculine ego. She found neither. What she found was something far more unsettling: absolute conviction. This man believed, with unshakable certainty, that he could protect them, and somehow that belief made her believe it too. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help us? You don't even know us." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. "I spent 15 years fighting enemies overseas, protecting people I'd never met, in countries I'd never seen. I did it because it was the mission, because it was right." He looked at Emma, who was now tentatively stroking Atlas's head, the dog's tail wagging slowly. "I came home looking for peace. But I learned a long time ago that peace isn't something you find. It's something you protect." Before Sarah could respond, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. "I installed motion sensors on your property perimeter while you were talking," he said, standing. "Someone just triggered the one on your driveway." Sarah's face went white. "They're back? Stay inside. Lock the door behind me." Marcus moved toward the exit, Atlas immediately at his heel, back in mission mode. "Don't come out until I give the all clear." He stepped onto the porch, and Sarah locked the door, with trembling hands. Through the window, she watched Marcus walk down the driveway with casual, unhurried confidence. Atlas moved slightly ahead, his posture alert but controlled. A sheriff's cruiser was pulling up. Sheriff Tom Hayward climbed out, a broad man in his late 50s with a gray mustache and tired eyes. He'd been sheriff of Timber Ridge for 20 years, and those years had worn him down like water-wearing stone. "You Marcus Reeves?" Hayward called out. "I am. Got a call about a disturbance at this address. Assault, threats, something about a dog attack." Hayward's eyes flicked to Atlas, then back to Marcus. "That your animal?" "He is. Military working dog, fully trained and certified." "Uh-huh." Hayward pulled out a notepad. "And you want to tell me what happened here today?" Marcus gave a concise, clinical report: 2 armed men assaulting Sarah Chen on her own property, threatening her minor daughter, his intervention to protect civilians under direct threat. He showed Hayward the photos he'd taken of Cole and Mitchell. "You recognize them?" Hayward's jaw tightened. He knew them. Cole and Mitchell Preston, local muscle. They've got records: assault, extortion, did some time in Deer Lodge. Who employs them? Hayward sighed, and in that sigh was a weight of frustration, anger, and helplessness. "Can't prove it. But everyone knows they run jobs for Vincent Garrett." "Then arrest Garrett." "For what?" Hayward's voice rose slightly. "I've got no evidence. The Preston brothers will claim Mrs. Chen attacked them first, that your dog was unprovoked. Garrett will say he's never heard of them, and his lawyers will bury me in paperwork. I've been fighting this for months, Reeves. I can't win." Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Then stop fighting alone." Hayward met his eyes, and something passed between them, an understanding between 2 men who'd served, who'd worn uniforms, who understood duty. "What are you?" Hayward asked quietly. "Navy SEAL. Retired as of 3 weeks ago." Hayward let out a low whistle. "And you just happened to be in the neighborhood?" "Renting the Bitterroot cabin. Came down when my dog alerted to screams." "Lucky timing." "Atlas doesn't believe in luck. He believes in threats." Marcus pulled out his phone again, showing the photos. "Run these men. I want to know every connection they have, and I want to know everything about Vincent Garrett and Mountain Vista Development." "You planning on starting a war?" "I'm planning on finishing one." Hayward was quiet for a long moment, studying this stranger, who'd appeared out of nowhere with a combat dog and the kind of dangerous competence that usually ended badly for someone. "I've got a deputy I trust. Good kid, former Marine. Between the 3 of us, maybe we can dig up something solid on Garrett." He looked back at Sarah's house. "But you need to understand these corporate types don't play fair. They've got resources you can't imagine. Sheriff, I've taken down terrorist cells with millions in Saudi oil money backing them. I've operated against Russian Spetsnaz, against Chinese intelligence operatives, against cartels with private armies. Vincent Garrett is a real estate fixer with a god complex. Marcus's voice was hard as mountain stone. He's out of his league. He just doesn't know it yet. Hayward almost smiled. Almost. All right. I'll start pulling records. You watch over Mrs. Chen and her daughter. But Reeves? He fixed Marcus with a hard stare. Keep it legal. I don't care how many medals you've got. You cross the line, I'll arrest you myself. Wouldn't expect anything less. Sheriff. As Hayward drove away, Marcus returned to the house. Sarah opened the door before he could knock, her face filled with desperate hope. The sheriff is limited by laws and procedure. I'm not. Marcus looked around the property with tactical eyes. Pack a bag for you and Emma, essentials only. You're staying somewhere safe. Tonight while I secure this location. Where? The cabin. It's defensible, isolated, and they don't know about it yet. He saw her hesitation. Mrs. Chen, Sarah, those men will report back to Garrett. He's going to escalate. Tonight, maybe tomorrow. You can't be here when he does. This is my home, Sarah said, but her voice cracked on the last word. And we're going to keep it that way. But right now, your home is a target. Your daughter is what matters. Let me do what I'm trained to do. Emma appeared at her mother's side. Mama, can we go with the superhero dog? Please? Sarah looked at her daughter's hopeful face, then at Marcus's certain one, and made the hardest decision she'd ever made. Okay. Okay, we'll go. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more incredible, true stories of courage and loyalty. 3 hours later, as the sun was setting behind the mountain peaks and painting the sky in shades of blood and fire, Vincent Garrett received a phone call that destroyed his carefully constructed world. He was in his downtown office, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Timber Ridge's main street, when his phone buzzed. Cole Preston. Tell me it's done, Garrett said, by way of greeting. Silence. Cole? We got a problem. Cole's voice was tight, pain obvious beneath the words. A big fucking problem. Garrett listened with growing horror as Cole described the intervention, the dog, the stranger. Mitchell's destroyed arm, the cold-blooded tactical assessment that had sent 2 experienced enforcers running like children. You let one man and a dog run you off? Garrett's voice was ice. He wasn't just one man. He was military, special forces, he said, Navy SEAL. And that dog, Jesus Christ, Garrett, that dog was a trained weapon. Mitchell's arm is shredded. Needs surgery. I don't care. About Mitchell's arm. I care that Sarah Chen is still in that house. She's not. Garrett froze. What? We circled back, watched from the tree line. She packed up, took her kid, left with the SEAL. They're gone. We don't know where. Garrett's mind raced. This was supposed to be simple scare. A widow, get a signature, move on. Now they had a wild card. An unknown element with military training who'd not only interrupted the operation, but extracted the target. Find out who he is, where he came from, everything. Already on it. Name's Marcus Reeves, renting the old Bitterroot cabin from Sam Morrison. Just moved to town 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks, Garrett repeated, before we started serious pressure on Chen. Could be coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. Garrett stood pacing to his window. Below, Timber Ridge looked peaceful in the dying light. This could be a play. Maybe Chen has family with military connections. Maybe she hired him. Don't think so, boss. The sheriff showed up, took a report. Word is the guy just happened to be hiking nearby, heard the girl scream. Wrong place, wrong time. For us, anyway. Wrong place, wrong time. Or right place, right time. Depending on your perspective. Garrett made a decision. We need to know what we're dealing with. I want full background military record, deployments, psychological profile, everything. And I want it by morning. How are we supposed to? I don't care how you do it. Hire a private investigator. Bribe someone at the VA? I don't care. Get me information. He hung up and immediately dialed another number. This one rang longer before a smooth, cultured voice answered. Garrett, I trust you have good news about the Chen property? This was Richard Drummond, CEO of Mountain Vista Development, Garrett's boss. A man who measured success in quarterly profits and failures in ruined careers. We've encountered a complication. Silence. The dangerous kind. The timeline you gave me was very clear, Vincent. I understand, sir, but a third party has inserted himself into the situation. Former military, special operations. He intervened during our conversation with Mrs. Chen. Then have him removed. The casual way Drummond said it, removed, like ordering the elimination of a line item on a budget, sent a chill down Garrett's spine. He'd done a lot of gray area work, but he'd never crossed into actual violence. The Preston brothers were his buffers, his deniability. Sir, we're talking about a decorated veteran. If something happens to him, the investigation, Vincent. Drummond's voice sharpened. Do you understand how much money is tied up in this project? The investors who are waiting? We have a narrow window for permits, for construction, for everything. Every day we don't have that land. Costs millions. I understand. Then make him go away. Bribe him, threaten him, I don't care. But the Chen woman signs those papers by the end of the week, or I'll find someone who can make it happen. The line went dead. Garrett stood at his window, looking out at the peaceful town, and realized he'd just been given an ultimatum that would require him to cross lines he'd never crossed before. He needed leverage. He needed information. He needed to know exactly who Marcus Reeves was and what it would take to make him leave. By midnight, he had his answer. The private investigator he'd hired, a former FBI agent with a specialty in records mining, had come through. The file landed in Garrett's email as he sat in his darkened office, a half-empty bottle of scotch on his desk. He opened it and felt his stomach drop. Marcus Reeves, Navy SEAL. SEAL Team, 5 years of service. 15 deployments. Iraq, 3. Afghanistan, 4. Syria, 1. Yemen, 1. Classified, 2. Commendations. Navy Cross, 2x Silver Star. 4x Bronze Star, with Valor. Purple Heart, with 2 clusters. Confirmed, hostile eliminations, 53. Official count. Actual number, likely higher. Specializations, direct. Action, close quarters combat. Tactical leadership, high-value target operation status. On medical leave following psychological evaluation. Cleared for duty, but taking voluntary recovery time. Military working dog, Atlas Belgian Malinois, 6 years old. Specialty, tactical assault, explosives detection, combat decorations. 2x Bronze Star. Confirmed engagements, 27 status. On leave with handler. The file went on for pages: mission summaries, after-action reports, performance reviews that used words like exceptional, elite, unparalleled lethality. This wasn't just a veteran. This was a warrior at the absolute peak of human capability. And Garrett had sent 2 street thugs after the woman he'd chosen to protect. He poured another scotch with a shaking hand. At the Bitterroot cabin, 3 miles up the mountain, a different kind of evening was unfolding. Sarah and Emma sat at Marcus's simple wooden table, eating soup he'd made from canned goods and fresh bread from town. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and safe, and that was worth more than any gourmet meal. Atlas lay by the fire, his head resting on his paws, his eyes half closed, but still tracking every movement in the room. Even in rest, he was a guardian. Emma had been frightened of the dog at first, despite her earlier brave words. The memory of Atlas's violence, the blood, the savagery was still fresh. But Marcus had knelt beside her, speaking softly. "Emmy, can I tell you a secret about Atlas?" The little girl had nodded, still pressed against her mother's side. He has 2 jobs. His first job is to stop bad people from hurting good people. That's what you saw today. He's very, very good at that job. Marcus gestured to the dog. But his second job is to protect kids, especially brave kids like you. I wasn't brave, Emma whispered. I was scared. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you're scared, but you do the right thing anyway. You tried to help your mama. That's the bravest thing I've ever seen. Now, hours later, Emma sat on the floor near Atlas, tentatively touching his soft ears. The dog's tail wagged slowly, his eyes gentle. Hay likes you, Marcus said, clearing the dinner dishes. He's nice when he's not being scary. The best protectors are. Sarah watched this interaction with emotions she couldn't quite name. This stranger had saved their lives, brought them to safety, fed them, and was now teaching her daughter that strength and gentleness could coexist in the same being. Mr. Reeves, Marcus. She stood, wrapping her arms around herself. What happens now? He dried his hands and faced her directly. Now I make sure you and Emma are safe. Tomorrow, Sheriff Hayward and I start building a case against Garrett and Mountain Vista that will hold up in court. We do this right, by the law. And if that doesn't work, Marcus's expression darkened slightly, then we do it my way. Sarah should have been frightened by that implication. Instead, she felt only relief. For the first time in months, someone was fighting for her, someone with the capability to win. There's only one bed, she said, suddenly practical concerns emerging. Emma and I can share, but I'll take the couch. I've slept in worse places. He smiled slightly. Atlas usually takes the floor, but I think he's been claimed by someone else tonight. They both looked at Emma, who had curled up against the dog's warm bulk, her eyes already drooping with exhaustion. Atlas had shifted slightly to accommodate her, his body forming a protective barrier between the child and the door. He won't leave her side tonight, Marcus said quietly. He knows she needs protection, and he won't rest until he's sure she's safe. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you for everything. Get some sleep, Sarah. Tomorrow, we start fighting back. As mother and daughter settled into the cabin's small bedroom, Marcus stood at the window, looking out at the bedroom. Darkness beyond. Somewhere down that mountain, Vincent Garrett was making plans. Somewhere, threats were forming. But up here, in this cabin, 2 civilians were safe, and as long as Marcus Reeves drew breath, they would stay that way. Atlas padded over to him, sitting at attention. Good work today, boy, Marcus said, scratching behind the dog's ears. But it's not over. You know that, right? Atlas's ears pricked forward, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the window. He knew. The first battle was won. The war was just beginning. Morning came with frost on the windows and news that changed everything. Marcus woke before dawn, old habit, and was making coffee when Sheriff Hayward's cruiser ground up the mountain road. The sheriff climbed out, looking like he'd been awake all night, his face haggard. Tell me you've got something, Marcus said, handing him a mug of black coffee. Oh, I've got something. I just don't like what it is. Hayward pulled out a thick folder. My deputy, Jesse Cortez, spent all night digging into Mountain Vista Development. The company itself is clean on the surface, registered in Delaware, proper corporate structure, legitimate contracts. But Mountain Vista is owned by a holding company called Cascade Ridge Investments, which is owned by Pacific Northwest Ventures, which is owned by a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands called Red Rock Holdings. Marcus felt his tactical mind clicking into gear. Money laundering, that's what we think. The amounts moving through these companies don't match the projects they're supposedly funding. And Red Rock Holdings has connections unproven, but strongly suspected to organized crime operations in Seattle. Define organized crime. The Volkov syndicate. Russian mob with tentacles in construction, real estate development, and, Hayward paused significantly, human trafficking. Marcus's hand tightened on his coffee mug. They're not building a resort. Oh, they might build 1. But my guess? Sarah Chen's property, with its access to Clearwater Creek, is the real prize. That creek flows directly to the Clark Fork River, which connects to transport routes all the way to the Pacific coast. It's a perfect smuggling route, isolated, difficult to monitor, and once they control the land, completely private. They're building an infrastructure for trafficking and smuggling, disguising it as a luxury resort. That's my theory. Can't prove it yet. But it explains why they want this specific property so badly. Sarah's land is the linchpin. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing. This wasn't just a real estate dispute. This was a criminal conspiracy operating under cover of legitimate business. And Sarah and Emma had become obstacles to an operation worth millions. Garrett probably doesn't even know the full scope, Marcus said, thinking out loud. He's middle management, focused on securing properties. The people above him are playing a much bigger game. A sound from the cabin made them both turn. Sarah stood in the doorway, her face pale. She'd heard everything. "They're going to kill us," she said flatly. "Aren't they? People like that don't just go away when you say no." Hayward looked like he wanted to sugarcoat it, but Marcus cut him off with brutal honesty. "They'll try." Sarah's knees buckled. She caught herself on the doorframe, one hand pressed to her mouth. "Emma. Oh God, Emma." Marcus moved to her side. "Sarah, look at me." He waited until her terrified eyes met his. "I have operated against organizations exactly like this in 7 different countries. I know how they think, how they move, how they fight, and I know how to stop them. You're one man. I'm one Navy SEAL. There's a difference." He glanced at Hayward. "And, we have a sheriff who's willing to bend some rules. And we have something they don't expect." "What?" "The truth. We know what they're doing. They think they're operating in shadow, but we've got a light shining on them. Sheriff, that connection to the Volkov syndicate, can you get federal attention?" Hayward nodded slowly. "If I can prove organized crime and trafficking connections, I can bring in FBI, maybe even DEA if there's a drug component. But I need evidence, not just circumstantial connections." "Then we get evidence." Marcus's expression hardened. "We make Garrett an offer he can't refuse." The meeting happened at noon, in a public place, the Timber Ridge Diner, Main Street, witnesses everywhere. Marcus had called Garrett directly, using the number from one of the letters Sarah had received. The conversation had been brief. "My name is Marcus Reeves. I'm representing Sarah Chen. We need to talk. We have nothing to discuss. We have everything to discuss, including your connections to Red Rock Holdings and their connections to the Volkov syndicate." The silence on the other end had been profound. The diner, noon, come alone, or the information I have, goes straight to federal authorities. Now, Marcus sat in a corner booth with perfect sightlines to all entrances. Sarah was safe at the cabin with Deputy Cortez and Atlas standing guard. Hayward was nearby in his cruiser, watching. Vincent Garrett walked in at Dos a Tres, 3 minutes late, a power play. He'd regained some of his composure since the previous night's panic. He wore an expensive suit, carried a leather briefcase, and projected confidence like armor. He slid into the booth across from Marcus, his smile cold. "Mr. Reeves, the war hero. You've done your homework." "Of course. Navy SEAL, decorated combat veteran, currently on medical leave for undisclosed psychological issues." Garrett's smile widened. "The kind of issues that make a man unreliable, aggressive, perhaps even dangerous to civilians." Marcus didn't react. "Is that your play? Character assassination?" "It's one option. I have others." Garrett opened his briefcase, pulling out a legal document. "This is a restraining order against you on behalf of my clients, the Preston brothers. It alleges that you and your vicious animal attacked them unprovoked, causing grievous bodily harm. If you come within 500 feet of them, or of any Mountain Vista property or employee, you'll be arrested. You're bluffing." The Preston brothers are wanted for questioning regarding assault on Sarah Chen. It's their word against a widow and an unstable veteran. Who do you think a judge will believe? Garrett leaned back, confident. You played hero, Mr. Reeves. Very admirable. But this is the real world. Money and lawyers beat heroics every time. Marcus reached into his own jacket, pulling out his phone. He placed it on the table, screen facing Garrett, and pressed play. Audio filled the small space, muffled, but clear enough. It was from the previous day, from the moment Marcus had confronted the Preston brothers after securing Sarah and Emma inside. Cole's voice, "You got no idea what you just walked into, friend. This is business. None of your concern." Marcus's voice, "Business for who?" Mitchell's voice, pained and angry, "For Mr. Garrett. He sent us to make the bitch sign, said to scare her, rough her up if needed." "Fuck man, my arm." Cole's voice, sharp, "Shut up, you idiot." Marcus stopped the recording. "I'm also wearing a wire right now." This entire conversation is being recorded and transmitted to Sheriff Hayward's personal device. "Smile, Mr. Garrett. You're building evidence." The color drained from Garrett's face. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus said, his voice low and hard. "You're going to go back to your office, and you're going to call Richard Drummond. You're going to tell him that the Chen property is off the table permanently. You're going to recommend that Mountain Vista abandon the entire Timber Ridge development. I can't, you can, and you will. Because if you don't, this recording goes to the FBI, along with Sheriff Hayward's investigation into Red Rock Holdings, the Volkov Syndicate, and the money laundering operation you're unknowingly fronting for." Garrett's hands were shaking now. "You don't understand what you're asking. These people, Drummond's people, they don't accept failure. Then I suggest you start running. Because when the feds come down on this operation, everyone in the chain is going to prison. Your only chance is to cooperate, get witness protection, and pray that Volkov's people don't find you first." Marcus leaned forward, his storm cloud eyes boring into Garrett's soul. "Or option 2, you keep pushing. You send more men after Sarah and Emma, and I stop being a defender and become a hunter. I will dismantle your operation piece by piece. I will find every connection, every player, every dirty dollar. And when I'm done, there won't be anything left but rubble and arrest warrants." He stood, looking down at the broken man across from him. "You have 24 hours to decide. After that, all bets are off." Marcus walked out of the diner, leaving Vincent Garrett sitting alone, with his terror and his terrible choices. What Marcus didn't tell Garrett was that the real investigation had already begun. While Marcus had been having his public confrontation, Deputy Jesse Cortez had been doing something more subtle and far more dangerous. He was following the money. Cortez was 28, former Marine Corps, with a degree in criminal justice and a personal grudge against organized crime. His younger sister had been a victim of trafficking 3 years ago. They'd found her eventually, alive but destroyed. The men responsible had evaded prosecution due to insufficient evidence. Jesse Cortez didn't believe in insufficient evidence anymore. He believed in digging until you found what others missed. "Sheriff, you need to see this," he said that evening, his laptop open on Hayward's desk. The sheriff, Marcus, and Sarah gathered around. Emma was sleeping in the back office, Atlas curled protectively by her side. "I pulled property records for every land acquisition Mountain Vista has made in the past 2 years. 47 properties total, is spanning 3 counties. Cortez pulled up a map with red pins marking locations. On the surface, they look random mountain properties, rural land, nothing connecting them. But, Marcus prompted, but when you overlay topographical maps and water routes, a pattern emerges." Cortez clicked another layer onto the map. Suddenly, the seemingly random properties formed a clear network. Every single property has direct access to waterways that connect to major transport routes, rivers, creeks, even old mining canals. "A smuggling network," Sarah whispered. "More than that, a distribution network." Cortez pulled up another file. I cross-referenced these properties with increased law enforcement reports in surrounding areas. Drug arrests, suspected trafficking cases, missing persons reports, they all cluster around properties acquired by Mountain Vista within 6 months of acquisition. Hayward let out a low whistle. This is federal. This is RICO. It's bigger than RICO, Marcus said, studying the map with tactical eyes. This is infrastructure. They're not just moving product, they're building a permanent operation. Your property, he looked at Sarah, is the missing piece. Clearwater Creek connects the northern and southern routes. Without it, their network has a gap. So what do we do? Sarah asked. We set a trap, Marcus said. Garrett's going to panic. He'll either run or he'll escalate. Either way, he'll make mistakes. When he does, we'll be ready. The preparation was meticulous. Marcus, drawing on 15 years of operational planning, turned Sarah's property into a defensive position without making it obvious. Motion sensors in the trees, cameras hidden in birdhouses, tripwires that would alert but not harm. We're not trying to catch criminals, he explained to Hayward. We're trying to catch them committing crimes. We need them to act, to make their move, while we document everything. But there was another layer to the preparation, one that Marcus didn't share with the sheriff. He called a number he hadn't dialed in 3 months. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. This better be good, Reeves. I was in the middle of something important. More important than helping a brother? A pause. Shit. You cashing in favors already? You've been on leave for like 5 minutes. The voice belonged to Danny Doc Morrison, Marcus's former teammate, currently stationed at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington. Doc was a medic, but more importantly, he was a tech specialist who could access systems that officially didn't exist. I need a background workup on a criminal organization, Russian mob, Volkov syndicate, operating out of Seattle with connections to construction and trafficking. Jesus, Marcus, you're supposed to be recovering, not starting wars with the Russian mafia. I didn't start it. They made the mistake of threatening a widow and her 7-year-old daughter. Another pause, longer this time. When Doc spoke again, his voice was different, harder, the voice of a warrior who understood that some lines couldn't be uncrossed. Send me what you have. I'll run it through our databases, see what shakes loose. But Marcus, if this goes hot, if you need bodies on the ground, I'll call. We're 2 hours away. The whole team. You know that, right? You say the word. We're there. Marcus felt something tight in his chest, loosened slightly. He'd left the teams, but the teams hadn't left him. Roger that. Stay on standby. Vincent Garrett didn't run. He didn't call the FBI. He made the worst possible choice. He escalated. At 2 a.m., 3 vehicles rolled quietly up the mountain road towards Sarah's property. Garrett had hired professionals this time, not street thugs but serious men. Ex-military contractors, the kind who'd operated in gray, sonas overseas, and brought those skills home for the right price. They came equipped for a hard assault body armor, suppressed weapons, thermal imaging. The plan was simple and brutal: secure the property, eliminate any resistance, and extract Sarah Chen by whatever means necessary. Make her sign, or make her disappear. What they didn't know was that Sarah wasn't there. She and Emma were 3 miles away at the cabin, protected by Deputy Cortez and Atlas. What was there, waiting in the darkness, was Marcus Reeves and Sheriff Tom Hayward. And they were ready. Marcus lay in a sniper position on a ridge overlooking the property, night vision scope bringing the darkness into sharp green focus. Hayward was in the house, positioned in a reinforced back room with clear sight lines. 3 vehicles, 12 hostiles, full tactical gear, Marcus whispered into his radio. This isn't intimidation. This is a kill team. Jesus. Hayward's voice crackled back. We're outgunned, Marcus. No. We're outmanned. There's a difference. The assault team moved with professional precision, spreading out to surround the house. They communicated via hand signals, their weapons tracking windows and doorways. They triggered the first sensor 50 meters from the house. Instantly, high-powered floodlights blazed to life, turning night into day. The thermal imaging the team was relying on was suddenly useless, their night vision overloaded. Marcus's voice boomed from hidden speakers, his phone linked to a PA system. "This is private property. You are trespassing while armed. Under Montana law, I am authorized to use lethal force to defend this position. You have 10 seconds to withdraw before I engage." The team leader made a fatal mistake. Instead of withdrawing, he ordered his men to assault immediately. They breached the front door with a battering ram, flooding into the house with weapons raised. They found it empty except for a simple note taped to the wall: "Smile for the cameras." Every room was wired with high-definition cameras, every angle covered, every face clearly visible, even through their tactical masks. "Fall back," the team leader shouted into his radio. "It's a trap. Fall back." But Marcus wasn't done. As the assault team tried to withdraw, Sheriff Hayward's voice cut through the night on a bullhorn from his concealed position. "This is Sheriff Tom Hayward. You are surrounded. Throw down your weapons and lie face down on the ground. This is your only warning." Headlights blazed from the tree line, not just one vehicle, but 6. State police, federal marshals, and FBI agents that Hayward had called in the moment the assault began. The assault team had walked into a perfectly executed counter-operation. They were outflanked, outmaneuvered, and caught on camera, committing multiple federal felonies. One by one, they surrendered. As federal agents secured the scene, Marcus descended from his position. He walked through the captured men, pulling off masks, taking photos. "Who hired you?" he asked each one. They all gave the same answer: Vincent Garrett, via a private security contractor called Apex Tactical Solutions. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed. Garrett answered on the first ring, his voice tight with stress. "It's over," Marcus said simply. "Your assault team is in custody. They're already cooperating. The FBI has everything: the recordings, the financials, the property records, all of it. You have one chance to save yourself. What do you want? Turn yourself in. Testify against Drummond, against the Volkov syndicate, against everyone. Witness protection, new life, stay alive. They'll kill me. They'll kill you anyway. At least this way, you take them down with you." Marcus hung up. 30 minutes later, Vincent Garrett walked into the sheriff's station and requested protective custody. He brought with him a laptop, 3 external hard drives, and 6 years of incriminating documentation on Mountain Vista development and its connections to Russian organized crime. It was the break the FBI had been waiting for. The federal investigation moved with surprising speed once Garrett flipped. Within 72 hours, 43 arrest warrants were issued across 3 states. Richard Drummond was arrested at SeaTac Airport, attempting to board a private jet to the Cayman Islands. 6 members of the Volkov syndicate were taken into custody in coordinated raids across Seattle. The Mountain Vista Development Corporation was dissolved, its assets seized, its properties transferred to federal custody pending criminal proceedings. Sarah's property, her home, her daughter's legacy, was no longer under threat. The story made national news. Federal Task Force dismantles multi-state trafficking network, read the headlines. Decorated Navy SEAL helps expose criminal conspiracy. Marcus hated the attention. He stood on the porch of Sarah's house 2 weeks after the arrests, watching Emma play in the dew, too jarred with Atlas. The dog had become her constant companion, a furry guardian who seemed to understand that his mission now was simply to be a friend to a little girl who'd been through too much. Sarah stepped out onto the porch, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to Marcus and stood beside him in comfortable silence. "The prosecutor's office called," she said finally. "They want me to testify at the trial. Against Garrett, against all of them. Will you?" "Yes." Her voice was firm. "They tried to take everything from me. They threatened my daughter. They need to face justice." Marcus nodded. "You're braver than most soldiers I've served with." Sarah laughed softly. "I'm not brave. I'm just a mother protecting her child. That's the definition of brave." They watched Emma throw a stick for Atlas, the dog retrieving it with gentle precision, his tail wagging in pure joy. "What will you do now?" Sarah asked. "Go back to your cabin? Back to recovery?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I don't think I need recovery anymore. No, I came here trying to escape violence, trying to find peace. But I learned something." He looked at Sarah. "Peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's knowing what's worth fighting for." Sarah's eyes shimmered with tears. "You gave us our life back, our home, our safety, our future. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. Protecting people like you and Emma, that's what I was trained for. That's what I'm good at. For the first time in months, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Sheriff Hayward's cruiser pulled up, and the grizzled sheriff climbed out with a broad grin. "Got news," he announced. "Just got off the phone with the FBI. They're officially recommending Garrett for witness protection, but he's going to serve time first 5 years minimum. The contractors he hired are looking at 15 to 20. And Drummond?" Hayward's grin widened. "Life without parole. The Volkov connections sealed." "And the syndicate itself?" Marcus asked. "Crippled. Not destroyed you. Never fully destroy organizations like that. But crippled enough that they're going to be too busy protecting themselves to worry about revenge. You did it, Reeves. You actually did it." Marcus shook his head. "We did it. You, Deputy Cortis, the federal agents, even the townspeople who sabotaged Mountain Vista's operations. This wasn't one man. This was a community fighting back." Emma ran up to the porch, Atlas at her heels. "Mr. Marcus." Atlas caught the stick midair. "Like a superhero." Marcus crouched down to her level. "That's because he is a superhero, remember? Are you a superhero too?" "No, Emmy. I'm just a guy with a very good dog." She hugged him suddenly, her small arms wrapping around his neck with surprising strength. "Thank you for saving us." Marcus felt his eyes sting. He looked up at Sarah, who was crying openly now, one hand pressed to her mouth. "You're welcome, kiddo," he managed. In Hindisfelden prose. Month later, Timber Ridge held a ceremony in the town square. It was a simple affair, no media circus, no politicians looking for photo ops, just the community gathering to honor its own. Mayor Patricia Saunders, a tough woman in her 60s, who'd run the town for 2 decades, stood at a makeshift podium. "We gather today to honor 2 heroes," she began. "Marcus Reeves and his partner Atlas, who put themselves in harm's way to protect one of our families and, in doing so, helped expose a criminal conspiracy that threatened our entire community." She called Marcus and Atlas forward. The dog walked at perfect heel, his bearing dignified despite the party atmosphere. "On behalf of Timber Ridge, we present you with the key to the city, a symbolic gesture, but one that comes with our deepest gratitude and respect. You will always have a home here, Marcus." "Both of you," the crowd applauded. Marcus accepted the key with quiet grace, uncomfortable with the attention but understanding its importance to the town. Then Sarah stepped forward, Emma at her side. "There are no words big enough to thank you," Sarah said, her voice carrying across the square. "You gave us back our lives, our home, our future. You asked for nothing in return. You're proof that heroes still exist, that good people still fight for those who can't fight for themselves." Emma stepped forward with a handmade card, its cover decorated with crayon drawings of a man and a dog. "This is for you and Atlas, so you remember us." Marcus took the card, his hands gentle. "I could never forget you, Emmy." Later, as the ceremony wound down and townspeople lined up to shake his hand, Sheriff Hayward pulled Marcus aside. "Got something to tell you," Hayward said. "The town council met yesterday. We've got a budget line for a new deputy position, and we all agree you'd be perfect for it." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Me? I'm not law enforcement." "You're exactly law enforcement. Military training, tactical expertise, and most importantly, a moral compass that actually points north." We need someone like you, Marcus. The department needs it. The town needs it." Marcus looked around at Timber Ridge, the small town that had claimed him without asking permission. He thought about his cabin, about the solitude he'd sought. He thought about Sarah and Emma, about the way protecting them had felt more right than anything in years. "Can I bring my dog?" Hayward laughed. "I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Hell, we'll make him an official Knuvi officer. First one in Timber Ridge history." Marcus looked down at Atlas, who sat at attention, watching the crowd with calm, intelligent eyes. "What do you think, boy? Want to keep protecting people?" Atlas's tail thumped once against the ground. That was answer enough. "Then I accept." The handshake that followed was more than just an employment agreement. It was a welcome home. 3 months later, Marcus stood on the porch of a house that was no longer a rental, but his own. He'd bought property on the edge of town, 5 acres with mountain views, close enough to respond to calls, but far enough for peace. He'd built a kennel for Atlas, though the dog still slept on the floor beside his bed most nights. His deputy's badge was pinned to his uniform shirt, the weight of it somehow lighter than the medals he'd earned in war. Sarah and Emma visited often. They'd become something like family, not replacing what he'd lost during his years of deployment, but creating something new and equally valuable. Today, Emma was teaching Atlas a new trick, laughing as the big dog gently took treats from her small hand. Sarah sat on the porch steps, watching her daughter with the kind of peaceful joy that only comes from surviving darkness and emerging into light. "Do you miss it?" Sarah asked quietly. The mountains of northern Montana didn't care about the wars of men. Marcus Reeves stood on the weathered deck of his grandfather's cabin, breathing in air so cold and clean it burned his lungs in the best possible way. The Bitterroot Range stretched before him, peaks dusted with early October snow, their silence absolute and merciful. After 15 years as a Navy SEAL, after missions in deserts and jungles whose names he couldn't speak, Marcus had come here seeking the one thing that had eluded him in every corner of the world: peace. The cabin was exactly as he remembered from childhood. Summer's rough-hewn logs darkened by decades of weather, a stone chimney that had warmed 3 generations, and that same creaking porch board. His grandfather had always promised to fix, but never did. Marcus was glad he hadn't. That creak was memory made solid, a connection to simpler times. Beside him, a low rumble of contentment broke the mountain silence. Atlas. The Belgian Malinois was 95 pounds of coiled muscle, burnished tan coat thick against the high-altitude chill, ears perpetually alert even in rest. Atlas wasn't a pet. He was a warrior. A military working dog who had saved Marcus's life in Kandahar, who had cleared buildings in Mosul, who had tracked high-value targets through terrain that would break most men. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Now, Atlas sat at attention, his intelligent amber eyes scanning the tree line with the same tactical precision he'd used in combat. But there was something different here. His tail that rarely moved in the field, gave a single, almost experimental thump against the wooden deck. He was trying to relax, too. Marcus reached down, scratching behind the dog's alert ears. "We're safe here, boy. Stand down." Atlas's ears swiveled toward him, processing the command, but 2 years of training couldn't be undone in a week. The dog remained vigilant, a guardian who would never fully let his guard down. The morning sun climbed higher, burning off the mist that clung to the valley below. Marcus could see the small town of Timber Ridge from here, just a scattering of buildings along a 2-lane highway, smoke rising from chimneys, a church steeple catching the light. Population 847, according to the faded sign at the town limits. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where locked doors were optional, where the biggest crime in recent memory was probably teenagers tipping over